Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to a little bit of Sins of Solar Empire 2. So, today I'm answering a question for myself that no one else asked me, but which I'm curious about, and that is figuring out what the relative economies for every faction is. The reason I'm actually looking into this is that I keep having this sort of thought in my head of I don't really know how Vasari ships are supposed to be costed compared to the other two. And you can look at their base costs and you can sort of try to come to some conclusions about how those ships are actually performing relative to their cost. But it's kind of irrelevant without knowing that Vasari are missing an entire third of the economy system of the game, which does change how the calculations, in my opinion, work out a little bit. So what we have here is a completely maxed out tech. I've just been running this after I've taken over the entire sort of galaxy here. Already beaten the person that we were fighting against, and we're going to check a couple different planets, and we're going to see what tech is capable of producing for income. Now, a lot of tech's income comes from trade. This has got some limitations to it. It is not actually possible to very elegantly fill out this entire thing without just getting way too much credit income. But you're capable of using credits to sort of like trade, so it's a little bit okay. And also, you can use your trade to actually very versatilely swap to a different type of resource. So you're always going to have way more credit than you are the other two options. But you can also use like your trade to level out and get more metal if you need more metal, or more crystal if you need more crystal. So one of the things that we're going to start off with is a comparison of each of the home planets for the three different main factions here. Now, I chose Tech Enclave, Advent Wrath, and Vasari Exodus for this. And you could actually use different sort of setups here, but I think that they should be pretty similar. I do know that there's some slight differences between what Primacy can do. I know there's a little bit of difference in what Alliance can do. I know there's a little bit of difference in what Reborn can do, but I think that it's similar enough that I'm not going to be too concerned about checking that. We have gone through basically everything that I could find that actually impacts our economy through here. And I made a bit of a mistake here. I should not have got, well, actually, I don't know. What we're trying to do here is make it so that we're using sort of the baseline of each of these planets. So I'm not using the text that improves specific planets. I did get the ones, though, here for the development upgrades for tech, because if you don't get those, you just have these unupgraded slots. And I do think that it's fair to take the text that let you fully upgrade this. The reason I didn't do this is I want to be able to sort of like generalize the ability of the stats that we get from this primordial planet to other planets that we could find, because there's a whole bunch of planets that are kind of similar to this, like the barren worlds or the ocean worlds or the gas giants or whatever. Those all have their sort of own thing going on, and I don't want to like check this for every single type of planet. I feel like the primordials are a relatively decent one. Every faction has unique text for each of the different planet types that can skew these results, so I'm just looking for a sort of generalized average. Now, I'm going to probably have to look at the Vasari again with the planetary upgrades, because they can get a bunch of planetary population upgrades, and I think those are actually necessary for them to keep up, but they don't actually have those for every planetary type, and they don't have them uniformly either. So let's take a look at the homeworld for the tech faction here. So part of it being a capital is that you do get a little baseline income here, 1.5 credits and 0.5 of metal and crystal. And you also get some more extra civilian and military slots there compared to what you normally would be able to get. So this does skew these results if I were to compare this homeworld to an Advent Terran world, which we're going to have a look at later. It's not going to be the exact same sort of results there. We do have full culture spread here, so we've got our 50%, in this case, aligned population, and we've got the commerce credit income rate as well. So our homeworld for the Terran faction here is producing 70.7 credits. This is not including any of our trade, so that will have to be calculated separately later. The items I've decided to go for here is the commercial district, which has been upgraded. We got the fulfillment warehouse, which technically gets us more direct resources than any other option that I could get. The thing is, I would never realistically actually use this, because I don't really care about just getting like more export points as much as I would prefer using that slot to get more metal slots, in which case I could switch out 3 of these to get more metal, or I could switch out to get 3 more crystal. That would be a far better item, but technically speaking, I get more money from this, even though I get more versatility from the other one. The other thing is the regional government offices. This gives us a little bit of credit rate income, as well as 4 additional orbital slots, which we don't need. We're like way past our required civilian orbital slot needs there. And the high density district. This is, as far as I can tell, the highest amount of money that I can get from a planet as as tech. I might have missed something here, but I believe that that is the best that we can do here. For structures, we have got our 5 trade ports. This is the maximum you're allowed to get. You're not allowed to actually just build as many as you want here. And we've got 2 Argonevs, and each of those has got their own sort of trade facilities, giving us 2 additional trade points. The total trade export points that we're getting from this planet is 10, so we're going to calculate based on that here. So like I said, 70.7 for credits. For metal, we're looking at 8.2, and then crystal, we're also looking at 8.2. So very, very credit skewed for the home planet for tech. One of the things that, like I said, you would probably be able to do here, and probably should do, is swap out this, get 3 additional metal slots, and then for your trade, you would be able to do 1 crystal, 1 metal, 1 crystal, 4 metal, and then the rest of it would go into credits. But let's take a look at what we can get for credits here. So if we assume that we're just going maxed out credits here, the income that we could get from this is 10 slots. That would be worth 18.8 income, which is going to add on to the amount that we've already got here. So we're looking at 89.5 credit income, which is pretty good there. So that's the tech home planet there. Let's start comparing. Let's just compare all of the home planets first, and then we'll go to the other types of planets in a second there. All right, and we're back. So now we're looking at the late game advent. This is not necessarily realistic, but this is what you would actually get if you're trying to max out the income for the advent. So yeah, again, capped out all the researches that are relevant here. As you can see, we've got some ones that we could take. We're just not going to, even though we could use those to improve our plants by a little bit there. And yeah, this is... We did actually cap out our homeworlds. We did take those techs, but I think that that's reasonable in all cases here. So Advent start off with the desert world, which is very different in terms of what it produces compared to what the tech faction produces with theirs. You get a lot of item slots on this. What we've gone for is the Plasma Furnace. We've gone for a Shrine of Prophecy, but that's kind of irrelevant. We could technically get rid of that. It's just that I don't have anything useful to replace that with here. So what we would probably do is get something like, say, the Neuro Augment Center, or we would get like maybe a Telepathic Relay, or we would get like the Cynosural Reserve. One of those things that just makes it so we got more focus resources or more influence resources. We could even get something like the Conversion Chance on the Temple of Assimilation, something like that. But realistically speaking, like we just don't have another eco item here, so 4 is fine. So we got the Plasma Furnace, we got the Tithe Sanctum, we've got the Coalescence Sanctum, and we've got the Crystal Enrichment Center. Nice thing about Advent is that you can actually get your generic metal increases as well as your generic crystal increases on most of your planets, as long as it's an actual planet, not like a moon or an asteroid or what have you. And those are pretty nice bonuses. You can also get your credit income increased on pretty much all of your planets, so you can just get everything. Same thing with the Coalescence Sanctum. This is actually a generic bonus from just giving you more allied population, as well as a very large tech bonus here. We got like a 297% increase to our research rate speed. So for our home planet here, we've got 58 per second credits. We've got 14.6 metal, and we've got 22.5 crystal. So as far as our crystal goes and as far as our metal goes, we're getting substantially more than the tech planet is capable of producing, especially crystal. This is more than double what they're getting of crystal there, which shouldn't be really too much of a surprise, but it's a surprise that they get this much more metal than tech does. We're also actually surprisingly close in credit income. We're a bit below, we're short by about 12.7. Now, obviously, tech is also capable of getting all those extra resources from their trade. So if we're to sort of throw 100% of that into credit, what you're looking at is about a 30 and a bit, I'd say 31 deficit in credits for Advent. And then you're looking at having, I think, 6.4 more metal and let's see here, 14.3 more crystal. The end total there is, I think the Advent planet is surprisingly close as far as what it's producing here. Now, we
Wait
have
to
our
come
Transcensia
in.
here. It's giving us Zealous Labor, giving us that plus 25, as well as the Evangelizing Nodes, giving us that culture rate spread. And we are also gaining Crystal, of course, from our culture. So those are all different sources of that. One of the things that's interesting is, technically speaking, we get more from having a Temple of Congregation than we do from having a extraction node. The extraction nodes provide us with 0.44 of whatever resource they're on, and they take up one of our civilian orbital slots, whereas a Temple of Congregation gives us 1 credit per second when it's been fully upgraded on this particular planet. The math for this is very varied depending on what type of planet you got, the population maximum. In this case, it's 600, and what level your Tithe Sanctums are at. But in this case, the math shakes out that a Temple of Congregation gives us exactly 1 credit per second, which at most exchange rates is better than what we're getting off of one of these sort of asteroid type things here. I think that technically speaking, going by the 2-to-1 exchange rate values, this planet, even if we include trade, is actually producing about the same amount of resources as the homeworld for tech, which is kind of interesting there. What's more interesting is what we're going to get to later, but these are the numbers that we're going to sort of record down for our home planet for the Advent faction. So on to the Vasari, which is going to be a real sorry state compared to these two. Okay, and here we are for the Vasari. Now, they have got less interesting things for their eco compared to the others in some ways. We do have our culture here. It's sort of maxed out there. We have got the items in this tree here maxed out. Fortunately for us, there's just the ferric transformation, so it's plus 30% to the population there. And yeah, we've gotten all of these sort of other upgrades along the way here as well. For Vasari, you do actually want to really get these orbital slots. As you can see, the amount that we're getting from one of them is actually quite high. 0.88 is enough that it's actually higher than a single... well, it's higher than a trade node for tech. So these things take up 1 civilian orbital slot. The trade routes take up 2. So if you double the value of these, that's how much value they have relative to a trade node, and this is substantially higher than that. No credit income, as is typical for Vasari. They just don't get access to that. And while we have gotten Orculus here, there's nothing here that actually earns you more resources. The infrastructural element for these guys is purely based on things like the ability to have like warfare research points off of it. This indirectly gives us access to more resources because we can throw all of our research onto our ships and to our star bases and stuff like that. We can throw all of our research rate onto there, all of our phase resonance. And what this does is it makes it so that our planets can have way, way, way more of these orbital extractors, which we normally sort of avoid with other factions. Or even if we don't avoid them, they're not as useful for other factions because they get in the way of your tech and your unit production, stuff like that. Things that you can throw on the Orculus for the Vasari faction. So there's an indirect way in which it helps, but I think it's a little bit weaker than it is for the other two factions there. So what we've done here is we've gone for the Indoctrination Center, giving you that extra allied population for a plus 6% bonus to your production. We've gone for the labor camps. These are probably one of our better options for just getting base amounts of metal, which is really important for this faction, and it comes in relatively early. I've gone for the crystal-seeking nanites, but maybe you should actually get the metal one for flat numbers, but it's hard for us to get crystal otherwise. And then we've gone for the matter hypercompiler, which gives us big amounts of surface mining rate, but also very decent orbital extraction rate bonuses. So this is, I think, the best I can do with Vasari. Someone might be able to correct me on that. We have got our culture spread to the maximum, and what we're getting from this is 27.3 metal and then 5 crystal, and then of course we're not getting any credit income. What's interesting to me is that the total of the resources that we're getting are actually less than the resources that I'm getting as Advent in terms of the total there. Obviously you're getting a good amount more metal, but we're getting so few crystal that the actual metal crystal amounts are actually higher for Advent than they are for Vasari, which is a little bit surprising to me. And then add on to the fact that you're not getting any credit income, and it's a little bit of a bleak situation economically for the Vasari by comparison to the others. So yeah, that's the homeworld here. I don't think there's really any way for me to have done this better, but Yeah, it's kind of interesting how rough it is from the perspective of what resources they're capable of getting from their home world. The lack of crystal on it actually really holds them back and really forces them to make sure they get a world that can generate crystal for them. In any event, though, let's talk a little bit about a summary here at the end of this. All right, and we're back. So basically, I've gone into a document and I've done some math and stuff like that. So what's interesting is if you just go based on the capital planets, the faction with the strongest income, even when accounting for trade, is surprisingly Advent. Depends on how you do the math up, but no matter how you do it, they're up a little bit ahead. The only way that you could actually get them lower than tech is if you go one for one on the metal and crystal for the cost of credits, in which case the tech faction is a little bit ahead. They're not tremendously ahead, but they are ahead. So the way that we've got this here is I've added up all of the credits and all of the metal and crystal and multiplied the metal and crystal times 2. That's standard convention for this. The other way is times 3. Those are the two conventional ways of doing it. In this particular case, if you go for tech using that method, you've got your 89.5 credits because we've got the trade added in. You got the 8.2, 8.2. The total after multiplying is 122.3 is their sort of like equivalent eco score. For Advent, they're 58 credits, 14.6 metal, 22.5 crystal, gets them 132.2. For Vasari, you're looking at a very sorry 54.8 as their equivalent score. Now, I also tried this with the times 3 values. For tech, you end up with a 146.9. For Advent, you get a 169.3. So the lead for Advent actually extends by a little bit compared to if you do the times 2. I actually think that if you're comparing tech and Advent economies, it is most sensible to go with that times 2 sort of like common nomenclature of like what a metal or a crystal is worth relative to a credit. But I think actually the way that you have to calculate Vasari stuff is that their stuff goes on a times 4 multiplier as their equivalent. And the reason I think it ends up being like this is if you sort of think about it, Advent is getting that extra 58 in credits, and they've got the most even distribution of their income out of the three factions there. That would be an equivalent of getting an extra 29 of metal or crystal. So we could sort of have that and say that's like a halved credit score or whatever. So this is like that sort of full extra stream of income there, and it's very, very high. That value is higher than either their metal or their crystal, and their crystal is insanely high. And if we sort of look at it that way, what you're seeing is that Vasari just is missing an entire revenue stream and is not really getting compensated for it. Yeah, their total score between those two resources is higher than Tech's, but not if Tech decides they're going to actually throw all their trade into metal or crystal. If Tech throws their stuff into metal or crystal, then they're actually getting pretty close to what Vasari and Advent are getting in terms of those like sort of resources. Not they're still behind, but like their halved credit score is also very, very high at 35.35. That adds into there. So Vasari is basically just missing the largest chunk of their economy without any compensation for it because their metal and crystal is basically what you would expect. So yeah, I think that if we're seeing this pattern sort of hold, which we won't, I'm pretty sure, the correct way to do this is for Tech or Advent, multiply the cost of your metals and crystals by 2. If you're playing as Vasari, multiply it by 4 to get a cross comparison. And I think that that is probably the way that we're going to potentially see this shake out there. Let's take a look at the Primal World, though, and we'll also take a look at the Primal World for Vasari after we've gotten some additional bonuses to it, because I think that it's going to be impossible to really compare them without getting those additional bonuses added on there. Okay, and we're back. So, yeah, this is the primal world for the Vasari. We've got similar sort of setup here. Maximum on our ally population. We've gone for the labor camp, the matter hyper compiler, the metal-seeking nanites in this case, and the indoctrination center. And but once again, we're missing out on that huge chunk of additional, like not having any of the commerce tree available to us. So we're missing this entire line of revenue for this planet here. Population is at 350. I believe that's actually lower than the base amounts for the other factions, so that might have to be something I have to think about. 0 credits, as usual. We're looking at a total of 7.5 metal, and we're looking at 3.0 crystal income. So we do have the ability to potentially get some other things that are unique to this particular type of planet for the Vasari. So we can get the genetic cataloging, and we can get the hyper immunity. And this will just increase the population here. We could also potentially get the organic reclamation nanites to get plus 2.4 to your metal rate and your 1.8 to your crystal rate, which could potentially make it so that we're a little bit better off here. We don't need these ones because we don't have, it's not a Terran world, so this doesn't actually boost anything for that. But we'll get these and we'll see how much that actually increases the effectiveness of the planet here and see if we actually sort of need that. So let's take a look at what this does to our planet here, and we'll get back to you. Okay, and we're back. So we've sort of broken our rule a little bit here just to see how much of a difference that makes, and it makes quite a big difference. I do think that Vasari, to a certain extent, rely on their unique planetary techs, because if they don't have them, they're actually kind of hosed. This actually also means that Vasari are uniquely screwed in situations where there's a lot of planets that they don't have their unique techs for. So, like, if you went into a situation where there were a lot of planets that you couldn't get these bonuses for them, like you got geomagnetic planets, you got irradiated worlds, you're kind of in a situation where you're in a lot of trouble. If you've got lots of barren worlds or asteroids or moons or whatever, I can see that Vasari players would actually struggle really, really badly with that. So with those upgrades, we've increased our metal income after we've gotten our population back up to full here to 13.1 and our crystal income to 8.9. These are much, much better numbers. So this is, I think, to help compensate for certain elements of weakness to the Vasari economy, but it still doesn't actually fully compensate them. The reason I think that this is here is because primordial planets have really good credit income, typically speaking. And as a result of that, they generate like a lot of value for tech or advent players. But if you're playing as Vasari, you're just not given that. So they have to be given something like the organic reclamation nanites, which is a very, very overpowered sort of bonus, just to sort of compensate for that lack of commerce there. And I don't think it's actually enough to keep up. Even with that, I think that this is actually still much weaker for the Vasari than it would be for tech or advent, which is very interesting to me. But in any event, we'll mark this down both ways, and we'll sort of see how we compare it when we get to the other factions there. All right, so just going backwards here, we're on to the tech version of this planet. And you can see like what it is that we're compensating for when we end up with all those extra items for the Vasari. We actually do have some unique techs for primal planets that we have not taken for the Advent, and we're not going to bother taking them. Even though they're actually pretty okay, I do actually think that they're both quite good. But what we're going to take a look at here is the credits value. You can see commerce maxes out at tier 5. Absolutely zany amount of credits there. And we do actually have that population cap of 350, so it is less than the Vasari with those techs there. But even with that, let's see how this goes. So for credit income, we're getting 45.3 incoming credits. I think that under sort of like the standard assumption of what our economy's doing, that's actually kind of by itself enough to put us on par with what the Vasari are getting. We've gone for a build here where we got the Coalescent Sanctum, the Crystal Enrichment Center, the Tithe Sanctum, and the Plasma Furnace, as well as 12 Temples of Congregation. Again, not a realistic thing for us to do. We don't actually need that much credit income, but it's something that we're able to get if we want to just max out our money here. For metal, we're getting only 3.2, which is very, very small amount there, and then we're getting 8.5 crystal income, which is actually really good. One of the things to note as well about the Advent is that if I want to, I can always switch a planet over so that it just produces metal instead of crystal. So we could actually be getting a balanced amount overall across our entire empire by swapping out the plasma furnace and making it so that all of these crystals get transformed into metal, making it so that we're closer to an 11 on the one resource and then none of the other one. So it doesn't actually matter too much if you're playing as Advent if you're getting a lot of metal. Or not enough metal at all, because you can always get more of it. It doesn't matter too much if you're not getting enough credits. The only thing that matters is that you can get enough crystal, and it's practically impossible to have low crystal income as the Advent there. So I wouldn't worry too much about the unbalance in this sort of instance as far as their economy goes, is what I am ultimately saying here. So yeah, we're looking at a pretty good amount of both credits and pretty bad metals and crystal rates, which is kind of expected. This is a credit generating type of planet there. So let's see how this compares to Tech, which should have fairly similar numbers, I think, to Advent overall here. All right, and we're back. So this is the Tech version of this same sort of primordial planet here. And what we've gone for in this particular build, I think might be a bit controversial. We've gone for the commercial district, the regional government offices, the fulfillment warehouse, and the orbital mining control. Realistically, we would want something that changes out our different slots. And I'm not actually sure that the orbital mining control makes a ton of sense here, but I couldn't really figure out what other buildings would actually be good here. We can actually remove this because it's not going to matter too much. Once again, we do have access to this chemical plant as a unique tech for this type of planet. We're not including those because you could end up with like a similar type of planet that doesn't have that specific bonus. This would be very strong for them, but so would the bonuses for Advent. The only ones that we're giving that exception to in this case is going to have to be the Vasari. But yeah, normally what I would do is I put down like an alloy foundry or a synthetic crystal farm, which would help level out our trade values rather than getting the fulfillment warehouse. I think that the fulfillment warehouse, like, we'll count it as having that, but it's such a weak item under normal circumstances. It's the same as one trading post, except it doesn't get you the trade slot. So it's pretty bad overall. The other problem is that the orbital mining control is just not very good. We don't have anything that really increases our planetary amounts there. So we're kind of relying on stuff like our commercial district. We do have an interesting situation, though, where our credits and our crystals and metals are really interesting in the market because we're getting a bunch of bonuses to those trade values. So you could actually say that with tech, if you got enough of it, you could just trade stuff in the market for those sort of rates there. I don't actually know for sure if that's enough to sort of compensate for that. And I'm kind of noticing I don't feel like we're actually getting very good scaling on getting a bunch of commercial districts. I'm not sure that they actually do scale. So in any event, though, that's our build here. We'll just add one more trade slot when we're doing that calculation. So anyway, we're getting 37.1 credits in income here, which is interesting that that's actually lower than Advent by quite a bit, actually. For metal, we're getting 2.2, which is pretty bad, and then we're getting 3.2 for the crystals. So this is all in all a pretty bad planet there. Notably, we have got 2 crystal extractors. That's why we got the unbalance between those two. We would actually have closer to 2.7 if we had one of each. But it doesn't really matter. We'll just put it down as all crystal there. So yeah, like this planet is pulling in quite a bit more value for, I think, Advent yet again. And I think what we're starting to see is that Advent Eco is a little bit underrated. However, what we have here is 3 trade and then another 4 trade and then another 1 trade here for a total of 8. So we can take a look at what that gets us here. We're capable of getting 15 credits per second from that. So we'll take it as credits. One of the things that you can check here is the ratios. So if we just do one of these here, it's worth 0.9. And one of these is like 1.9. If we check 2 here, we can actually see like it's actually just like this is half of whatever this is. So it, in all honesty, is like fine to just leave this, assuming that we're going for a 2-to-1 ratio, as credits. It doesn't really matter for us to like swap it to metal or crystal or anything like that. We can just leave it as is here. So marking it down as 15 extra credits, that does catch us up a little bit to Advent. I think that we're ahead on credits by a decent amount there. But the crystal bonus that Advent are getting ahead of you is actually enough that I think that they're overall a little bit above you. And I think that you're also still way, way above Vasari using normal math here. But yeah, it's not the best planet type for tech, actually, surprisingly, which I'm kind of surprised by. In any event, though, yeah, that's this planetary type. We'll sort of summarize in just a little bit here once I've got my numbers down. Okay, I've crunched the numbers here. So for the Primordial world, assuming that we've gone for just the baseline techs, we haven't done any of the unique techs for any of the factions here. Tech is running in at 62.9 for the total, so 37.1 plus 15 for credits, then 2.2 on metal and 3.2 on crystal. getting them that to the 62.9 there, assuming that we're going at ×2. For Advent, it's 45.3 credits, 3.2 metal, and 8.5 of crystal, getting them a total of 68.7, assuming we're going at a ×2 conversion rating as well. For Vasari without the unique upgrades, we're looking at an abysmal 21 for ×2, 31.5 at ×3, and 42 if we go up to ×4, which is pretty bad. However, their unique items and techs are stronger than the other factions, and they bring them up to the point where they're more competing on par. Now, if we did have that extra boost to the money on tech, and if we did have an extra item slot on Advent, we might end up with slightly different numbers for them as well, and I would actually rate the planet a little bit better for them for different reasons. But for Vasari, what we're looking at is 13.1 metal and 8.9 crystal, gets us 44 if we're doing the ×2 conversion, 66 if we're doing the ×3, and 88 if we're doing the ×4. So obviously in this instance, we only need to go a ×3 conversion to have our fully upgraded, fully teched up planet that has got a lot of very powerful unique techs catch up to the non-teched up Advent or tech versions of it. So I would still probably go for the ×4 conversion at this point in time, but we'll still have to see how things go as we continue on. I do think that we're going to find that Primordials are slightly skewed for Vasari in a way that some of their other planets are not. But that also applies to Terran worlds, so that could also help them out in that particular case. I don't think that's going to compensate enough, though, for what you can get with the Terran worlds if you're playing as tech, though, or Advent, because both of them can get into the high 70s for credit income on a Terran world. So in any event, though, that's that type of planet. Next up, let's take a look at the let's go to the one that I think is actually going to be the most advantageous for Vasari, which is going to be the volcanic worlds here. All right, we're back. So we're looking at a tech volcanic world here. And I did actually opt to give them the geothermal smelter. I was kind of debating on that. The reason I'm giving it to them is just because we've got a situation where the Advent's generic plasma forge, which can be added to basically any planet, doesn't really matter which, it kind of does the same thing as the geothermal, which tech can only put onto their volcanic worlds. So I felt like this was kind of fair. We're also going to have to do the same thing, though, for Vasari, where we're going to add in all of their unique techs. There is actually another unique tech that I had to pick for tech here. The reason I did this is because this just unlocks slots for them, and I did that for all the factions where that was necessary. Because otherwise, Advent would be stuck on not having any of their tech for commerce open. So we've got here geothermal smelter. We got the regional government office, which gives us that extra credit, and then the orbital mining control. In this particular case, this one is exactly half of getting just another trade slot, but it's hard for me to really justify that. I guess we could actually change that out, though. Realistically, you're always going to get the regional government office because it's better to have access to these things than it is to just have an extra point of credits. But in any event, though, we've got our two Argonauts. We're just going to calculate the same way we have in every other time, and we got the 3 trade ports here. So a total of 7 trade for this planet. So base values that we're getting here are 5.8 on our credit income, which is really bad for tech planet. We're getting 4.5 for metal, which is a lot lower than I thought it was going to be, and we got 0 on credit income. So I think that we're getting hammered by a couple different factors here, but Advent just doesn't really have the ability to get their resource gains up to super high levels. We do have 4 levels of metal extractor here, so this is slightly RNG based depending on what you're getting, but 4 is about as much as you can hope to get, typically speaking. I would say that this is a pretty average planet as far as that goes. Now, this does open up an extra 2 metal trade slots as it is, so this is actually not that bad. But what we're getting with 7 trade here, we're getting an equivalent of 13.1 additional credits there. Added on top of our 5.8 credit income, we're looking at a planet that's giving us a decent amount here. We're looking at 18.9 plus our 4.5 metal. That's not terrible, but volcanic worlds typically are quite bad, and I expect this one to actually be very heavily in favor of the Vasari. But let's take a look at the Advent. We're just going back and forth in this sort of comparison here. So this is our look at an Advent version of a volcanic planet. This one, actually, I probably want to switch out. I think our Temple of Congregations are slightly worse here than getting access to one of these, so we'll do a recheck here. But all we have to do is delete 2 Temples of Congregation and then build up 2 of these metal asteroids. So in this particular case, we've got the Tithe Sanctum, the Plasma Furnace, and the Silent Monastery. We've also got, of course,
We await your command.
our starbase over here. Pretty much the maximum that we can get, and then we've got the maximum number of Temples of Congregation that we're able to get here. So the amount that we're getting off this one is 5.9 credit income, 3.2 metal, and 1.3 crystal income. It's kind of fun that you can get crystal income as Advent on planets like this, but that is one of the unique things about them and their culture. We're going to go ahead and delete 2 of these here, but we've got our number sort of locked in because I can always just check that later. So we're just going to get rid of 2 of those.
Sacrifice begun. The Unity's needs have changed.
And we're just going to build 2 of these, and we're going to see how that changes the numbers here. So we've gone down to 5.7 credit income, which is barely any change whatsoever. We're still going to keep all these because we've got nothing better as far as money goes. And now that we've got those increases to our metal increase, we've got 4.1 metal. We got 5.7 of credits, 4.1 of metal, and then 1.3 of crystal. So I do think that volcanic worlds are one of the worst worlds that you can get as Advent. They're one of the least important for you, but being able to get like some metal income just natively without having a high amount of crystal is kind of nice for just having their economy balance out there. If we look at up here, we're getting 30.9 metal with this entire sort of like everything taken over here. And then for crystal, though, we're getting 54.4. So you're skewed pretty heavily towards crystal just innately as Advent. Even if you've got sort of everything taken over. No unique stuff whatsoever for us to get for lava planets here. They're definitely not what we're supposed to be like aiming for or anything like that. Still, though, it is very nice to just have like the plasma furnace and then have like a couple of your exotic refineries around these worlds. That's typically what I go for. But we are actually pumping the percentages up by a pretty good amount, in all honesty. So in any event, though, that is going to be this one. Let's head on to the Vasari and see how things go. Alright, and here we are for what is probably going to wind up being the strongest thing for the Vasari and weakest for the Advent, who are kind of in the lead right now. So let's take a look at this. So what we've decided to go for here is the Labor Camp, the Metal-Seeking Nanites, and the Matter Hypercompiler. I think this is probably the strongest we can get out of this planet, but it does make it pretty one-dimensional. So this is one of those planets that doesn't produce like a huge amount of commerce and is very skewed towards metal. And the Vasari economy is custom built to get the most out of metal here. Now, one of the things that's a little bit unfortunate is we did have that tech planet that had like 4 metal extractors, whereas everyone else only has 2. But we're just going to sort of like skim by that a little bit there. Obviously, like I would like to be able to adjust that, but sometimes you just have to roll with the punches a little bit as far as that goes. We'll probably adjust the tech metal gain down by about 1 point, just to sort of compensate for that, because I think that that's how much they're getting from their additional orbital extractors there. Anyhow, yeah, so one of the problems here is that Vasari do have access to all of these unique techs that make it so that they're getting almost double value out of volcanic worlds. The thing is, though, like, I think that this is one of those rare instances where usually volcanic worlds are relatively guaranteed where you get them, and they're not really that good of a planet for anybody, and I think that sort of includes Vasari. They're kind of a weak planet type, but we'll still have to give it a go here. So basically we get no credits, we get 9.8 metal, and we get 0 crystal. Again, we're going to get nearly double that once we increase the population, but we're still going to check to see what the exact number is after that. I still think that we should probably just record down 9.8 here just to sort of note that, but here it goes as far as going for this. So you can see, like, if you're getting planets like these gas giants, or you're getting things like these geomagnetics or these irradiateds, you're getting really, really stuffed as Vasari. Like, you need to get planets that have these sort of unique techs to them, I think, to keep up with the other factions. Like, if you had an ocean planet, like, these are powerful bonuses. This is a very, very strong bonus. So you could get this and have it so that you're capable of sort of keeping up with the economies of the other factions there. But yeah, without that kind of stuff, you're kind of kind of in a bit of a pickle there. So anyway, we'll be back in... actually, we could always just speed this along here. So we'll sort of be able to see like what our population is doing as this goes. And we could also go ahead and get... Well, I can't actually do that until I've got them researched. We might as well. So just let us get our population to increase once we got access to that.
Empire research complete.
Do it this way. And you can see, like, we're going up from like 150 to 185 here. Our metal income is slowly rising. What's our base surface rate value, actually? Because that won't be affected by this.
Complete.
The mining base is 5.7. The pop is actually only 2.8. So we're actually going to get not that much out of this. I think we're going to end up capping around 12.
Empire research
which is still better, but, like, it's sketchy compared to what I thought we were maybe going to get. But I forgot the base values for this type of planet were so high, especially for Vasari with the techs increasing the base values. Alright, so we got all of those. We just have to wait for the population to tick upwards. You can see that's going up fairly quickly thanks to all of those labor distribution centers. But it's probably capping out close to 12. Maybe still under that, but I'm guessing maybe 11.5, 11.7 maybe? Yeah, that was pretty close. 12 was pretty close. One more, please. There we go. One more? And I was off by 0.1. All right, so we're looking at getting upgraded to 11.9 with all of those techs. So less of an impact than I really thought there was going to be there. But I think this is actually going to push them way ahead of the other factions. Maybe not Tech, actually. Tech gets actually a really good deal out of incredibly bad planets because of their trade resource being very planet agnostic. They don't really care what type of planets it's around. So they're able to get a lot of resources from things like volcanic worlds. But we'll have to go ahead and just take a look at what this levels out to for everybody. And yeah, once I've got the math done, I'll be right back. Alright, so I've done the numbers for this one, and this one is in fact very Vasari favored. Even if you're not getting access to all of those unique Vasari techs, this one's actually pretty good for you. This is also by far the worst planet for the Advent, which I kind of expected. So for Tech, with the trade coming in clutch for them, they're getting a 25.9, assuming they're going at the ×2. For Advent, you're only getting 16.5, and this is when after I penalized Tech for having too many of the mining things there. I subtracted 2 of those to get 3.5 for their metal income, which is what it would be if they had the same spawn as everybody else. Otherwise, Advent would have actually a higher value from that, and Vasari would have a higher value, because both of them get slightly better value out of those sorts of things as opposed to other options. So for Vasari, they've got that 9.8 metal, and they're not getting like a variety of stuff. This is heavily unbalanced, but going at just the ×2, they're actually already caught up pretty much at 19.6. This is pretty comparable to what Tech is getting. It's better than what Advent is getting. 29.4 if you're doing ×3, and 39.2 if you're doing the ×4. If you got the 11.9 from having the population up from all those unique techs, which is kind of disappointing actually, you're getting a 23.8 at the ×2, 35.7 at ×3, and 47.6 if you're going for ×4. I would note, however, that if you're just capturing this, a snow planet and an asteroid, you're still actually behind as Vasari, even if you're going at the ×4, so this isn't as fantastic as it sort of looks for them. These are definitely the sorts of planets, and a system that's choked with this kind of planet there is going to heavily favor Vasari compared to some of the other options that are out there, but I think that Vasari are actually sort of very RNG dependent on what sort of planets they spawn near because of the weakness of their home system, whereas Advent and Tech can kind of rely on their home system to carry them through a spawn that has like bad planets around them. Not any event though. Yeah, let's get onto the asteroids and see how that goes for everybody. So once again, we're working our way backwards this time. We're going from the Vasari first here. So asteroids don't really have anything unique for them, so this is one of those ones where they just sort of have to take what they can get. However, they do have 2 very powerful items for asteroids compared to what everyone else gets, because usually Tech or Advent have to use sort of weaker items to put on their asteroids. Vasari does not. So what you got access to here is the Matter Hypercompiler and the Labor Camp, and those are both very, very powerful. Once again, we're looking at 0 credit income. For metal income, we're looking at 4.1, and for crystals, we're looking at 2.3. I have a feeling this isn't actually going to be as much ahead as they would like to be compared to the others, but this is definitely a planet that I think is going to be relatively okay for the Vasari compared to the others, but I think that this one is the one that's going to really favor tech compared to the others. So I think we're looking at a pretty interesting range of different types of planets and different effects that they all have. So anyway, we'll be back in just a second here. All right, so as we sort of mentioned, Advent has got a much weaker set of items that they can put on their asteroids. However, they do have access to the Transcentia, giving them
the Unity wills.
Zealous Labor, as well as the Evangelizing nodes, which gives them a lot of value out of their asteroids anyway, so they're kind of okay. I've got, in this particular case, the Silent Monastery. We've also got a Shrine of Harmony, but the Shrine of Harmony doesn't really give us anything here. I actually want to just double-check something here. Yeah, I can... So if we take a look at the items available, it really is just Shrine of Harmony and then like any of this sort of stuff here, none of it which increases our actual income. Really good one actually to put on these planets is Telepathic Relays, and usually I would actually go for like a like Shrine of Harmony or a Shrine of Hostility and then a Telepathic Relay. Alternatively, we could do stuff like the Temples of Assimilation or the Unity Protectorate if we think that an asteroid is going to get attacked. Having that combination here really, really helps, but because of that, like, your economy does suffer a little bit on this type of planet. It just doesn't have very many options. The Silent Monastery is just a really bad upgrade, and I kind of wish it was a little bit better there. Anyhow, so as far as what we got here, we've got 3.4 credits per second, and we've got 2.4 metal, and then 3.1 crystal. Our crystal gain is actually making it so that we're in a pretty good spot as far as this goes. And then having, of course, the credit income also helps out a little bit there. But we're going to get crushed by Tech Enclave here just because they're going to have the 4 trade from their 2 Argonevs, and that's going to make a huge difference in terms of their overall income. So we'll check that out, and we'll be basically comparing out the asteroids here. One of the problems here is that we do have like various different amounts of extractors here. I'm going to try and equalize those a little bit, but yeah, we kind of have to sort of deal with the fact that those are randomized. Alright, so here we are. We've actually got 2 different setups here. Now, we got one of our systems here that's designed with 5 of our different metal extractors, which does mean that we're not capable of putting down any additional sort of stuff here. Actually, I need to do this here, but... yeah, so this system gets locked out of some interesting stuff because we got access to these metal extractors. We're going to find out if that actually makes it better or worse compared to another system that only has 3 metal extractors, but is going to be used to give us a little bit of trade as well. So I'm not sure if the extra 1 port of trade is better than the extra 2 of these. My understanding is that if you got the orbital mining control, it's actually stronger to have access to the extractors, but if you've got access to the trade route, you can actually get an extra trade point, which does, I think, push you over the edge. So we'll compare the 2 and we'll find out in a little bit here. So this is one that's got, like, we've got 2 Argonevs and we've got 0 trade. So we still have 4 trade points from here. It's just that we can't get that trade point from our planet items, and we can't get the extra trade port itself. So this style of asteroid is giving us a pretty okay amount of credits there at 4.1. We're getting 2.4 metal, and then I'm getting blocked by some guy in my Steam friends list there playing the Bazaar. 1.9 in crystal. And if we take a look here, we do see that we're slightly skewed towards metal as far as our extractors go. So we're looking at a situation where it's to be expected that we're getting a little bit more as far as the metal goes. So 4.1, 2.4, and then 1.9, and then we got access to 4 points of trade, so we're just going to go ahead and do this here, and that's 7.5, so that's not that bad there. We're going to compare that over to this one over here. So same sort of situation here, except this one also has got a trade port and is missing 2 extractors comparatively. So this one, we're earning that 4.1 credits. We're earning 1.9 metal, and we're earning 1.3 crystal. but we're capable of getting a decent amount more from our trade here. So we're actually capable of getting 6 trade from this planet rather than just 4. And that's giving us a total of 11.3 per second. So I'll do the math and run the numbers there, but I do believe that this system is getting us a little bit more value than the other one, just because we're capable of getting that extra planetary item. By my estimation, this is also the highest out of all of them on an asteroid, but yeah, the asteroids are pretty sad amounts of resources for everybody, I feel like. So anyhow, I'm gonna go run the numbers, and we'll go figure out who's on top for this particular sort of thing here. Alright, so we got the numbers in here. So for asteroids, Tech is looking at a total of either 20.2 if they've got 5 orbitals, but interestingly, if they have access to 5 orbitals, they should only take 3 because you can actually get 21.8 if you've got the trade available. For Advent, they're the lowest at 15.4, or they're kind of the lowest at 15.4. For Vasari, if you're looking at the values here, you've got either 12.8 at times 2, 19.2 at times 3, and 25.6 at times 4. So the problem here is I've adjusted up the Advent so that they've got 5 of the orbitals, the same as the other two, to get their 15.4, but they kind of don't depend on it quite as much as the others for their values, whereas Vasari kind of rely on the most. So if you get an asteroid that's only got like 3 orbitals, then you're in a situation where you're missing out on a lot of potential income because each of theirs is worth like almost a full point. So they're vastly, vastly better at those orbital mining slots than every other faction in the game. And as a result, your asteroids are much more variable. This is the best possible asteroid that you could possibly get for Vasari, and it's getting them a little bit less than Tech and potentially a little bit higher. So at the end of this experiment, what I've done here is I've actually totaled up everything that you've got available for this. Now, I know that you're going to have like other planets or more planets, but I think that what we can find from this experiment is kind of an average-ish amount from all of it. Like, for example, we've got moons, and these are providing a little bit of credit, a little bit of metal, a little bit of crystal, but they have no orbital slots. So these things really screw over Vasari, and they really benefit Tech because they've got the ability to put a bunch of mining ships around it. Advent is capable of getting them to produce crystal, and so on and so forth. So you end up in a situation where, like, these ones are really, really bad for Vasari. They have no unique techs for them or anything like that. So you know, you've got those sort of planets. You've got the crystal planets that are really good for Advent. They really like those. You've got other types of you've got the ice planets. Those are better for Vasari as well, although not as good as the volcanic world. So you get that variety across the board there. And at the end of the day, you sort of tally it up and what I've got from the planets that we've experimented with. So you've got your home world, you've got a primordial world, you've got an asteroid, and you've got this volcanic world. The tech total for this is 232.9, assuming that we're going by times 2, whereas Advent is getting 232.8. So virtually identical, actually, between Tech and Advent, assuming that both of them are going for full eco builds, which you're not going to realistically do for either faction. You're going to do some other stuff as well. You could get full eco faction for Tech super, super late game, but generally speaking, you're going to want a few other things along the way. For Vasari, we're looking at 131.2 if we're going for the times 2 method. So they're getting way less resources. 196.8 if you're going with times 3, and 262.4 if we're going for the times 4 method. So this is also assuming that Vasari gets their unique techs and the other factions do not. To increase their planetary population or to get extra item slots or whatever. So Vasari is also running at a little bit of an advantage there, but not much of one. And in this particular case, like, I would still say that it's probably fair to go with Vasari is at times 4 of their resource cost. But you actually do have a tech in here that does decrease the cost of like their ships by like 20% or 24%. Which does make it so that, like, yeah, you figure out their new cost and it's like way cheaper. You multiply that by 4. I think that is probably the intended sort of balance point for their cost. But it's really hard for me to say. But regardless, from this point forward, when I'm doing the relative cost for ships, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have tech ships and Advent ships at times 2 value of the resources. transfer it into credit cost. And for Vasari, I'm going to be doing ×4. We could also do ×3.5. I think that ×4 is just going to average out to be a little bit cleaner majority of the time there. So in any event, though, that is going to be our video for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.